Today, we're going to do a tutorial, and there's two things I want to teach you guys today. The first one is a solution to creating much more elegant forms within HTML. And by elegant, I mean about the actual implementation. So when you're programmatically triggering a form, you're making sure that it's valid and all the content within it's valid. Now, with this new elegant way, which is a very minor change, but it can be so important, and you're going to see that, you're going to make your forms much more robust and better. The other thing I want to teach you guys today and show you as a little trick is an attribute you can add to your HTML forms, which will essentially disable everything inside the form tags. So if it's an input, if it's a button, if it's a password field, if it's a text box, everything will be disabled. You won't be able to click on it, but the look and feel will be the same. And then I'll show you how to style that so you can make it feel like it's actually disabled. And it's just with one keyword, so I'll leave that till the end. So jump in with me and let's learn something cool. Okay, so what you can see is my forms.html, a very simple HTML script. I'm not doing any complicated stuff today. It's very simple, very fundamental, but very important. Because I'm doing everything in VS Code, there is a shortcut you can type, which is an exclamation mark. And if you just tab, it will essentially create this whole HTML shell for you, which is fantastic. It just makes you, set your project up super quick when you're just working with a simple HTML document. Now I'm going to give this a title. I'm going to call it, I need to move my mic because I can't see my keyboard. I'm going to call it forms. And within the body, we're just going to type hello because I want to test that it works. If you're using VS Code, and I assume most of you are, and you should because it's a great development environment, if you just go to the left and you go to your extensions, you'll have an extension called Live Server. Now, make sure you install that, make sure you have it. It should be like the thing you always use. Now, the great thing about that is that if I have an HTML form, here right at the bottom, we have a button called Go Live. And if I just click that, essentially it'll start the server up for me where the content of my HTML page will be present at the top. So here we go, we already got it started and we can see the results of everything that we type in our code right on the web page. Now, going back into VS Code, first of all, we have to reference a style. We're going to be working with styles. I want to keep it all in the same document. So we're just going to create a style tag here. And that's where we're going to put all our CSS. And then also we're going to work a little bit with JavaScript. So we're just going to include the script tag right at the bottom so everything is ready. You see that my formatting changes, and I've got it set to change whenever I save my document. It's the prettier extension in VS Code, so I highly recommend you guys also get it. It makes the styling and the formatting the same, which is great when you're working with a big project. Everything is always like top notch. Anyway, back to the forms. So the first thing I think that we should do is actually create the form. Let's go into our body here, and we're going to create a form. Now, I'm not going to give the form any action. I'm just going to keep it as simple as possible so you guys actually understand. We're going to create a label, which is going to be for the field name. And then we're going to call this name. And then we're going to create another input, which will be of type text, like so. And if I save it, you'll see that the closing tags get added. And then the last thing I want to add is a button. And I'm just going to call this button change name, as simple as it can be. So if we actually go back to our browser, you're going to see that this name field has been created here. I can type something and I can change the name. And essentially what will happen, and I'll open up my console, it will probably start submitting events. But we're not going to do that just yet. The first thing I want to do is just add some styling, position it right in the middle, so it'll be easier for us to kind of watch it change rather than right here in the corner. And the simplest way to position things in the middle, in CSS, you reference the whole body, and essentially the whole body, we want it to have a whole width and height of 100 viewport height and viewport width, so the width of the screen. So height, if I can spell that correctly, is 100 viewport height. Width is 100 viewport width. And then we're going to play with flex. In all my tutorials, I always encourage using flex. So we're just going to set the display to flex. And then we're going to say align items center and justify content center. These two commands do is they just position things horizontally and vertically in the center. So now if we go back to our Chrome, you'll see that it is right here in the middle of the page. So just centered everything for that whole body that takes up the whole width and height of the screen. Okay, so now this is where the fun actually starts, and this is where I'm going to start to explain to you why you want a more elegant way to create these forms. Now let me just zoom into this browser so you can actually see this input much better. Now let's go to our code and actually implement a little bit of JavaScript. A little bit of JavaScript that when I click this button, this form event will trigger. So we will submit this form. So I go back to VS Code, and then I'll go into my script. I need to reference two things. I need to reference the form that I'll be targeting and the button. So let's create a const form. And we can say that the document.query selector, which is essentially a selector for any type of element, whether it is just the element name, the ID, the class name, and so on and so forth. In this case, I'm just going to target the element name, and I'm going to say the form, because we only have one form on the page, so we don't have to be super specific. The other thing I'm going to target is the button, and we're going to say document.query selector also, and I'm going just to call it the button. We had two elements on the page, the form element and the button element within the form, and we're targeting those with JavaScript. If we, for example, create an event listener for the form or for the submit, it might not always work because the HTML won't render yet before the JavaScript fires the event. So we might get errors where, for example, the button is not there because it hasn't rendered the button, but the JavaScript has already fired. So just to make sure that doesn't happen, we're just going to wrap the button in an if statement saying, well, if the button exists, only perform those actions. So now what we want to do is create an event listener to target our button. So when we click our button, the form actually submits. So what we can write is button.add event listener. And this is going to be a function that takes two parameters. It takes the action, which is on click or just click. And then it takes a function which will perform the submission of the form, where we just target the form and we say dot submit. And if I can type that right, then it would be correct. Okay, and a semicolon here. Okay, oh, I typed it wrong again, submit. There we go. Okay, I have just realized that I have spelled document wrong here. Document wrong, okay. For visual purposes, I can just add a console log here. A form has been submitted like so. And if I just change here, you can see in the console that it's actually printing that it has been submitted, but nothing happens. Now, this is where things actually start getting interesting, because if we go back to our Visual Studio Code and, for example, this input, I'm going to mark it as required, which means that if it's not filled out and has to be filled out because I'm marking it as a required input field, now, if we actually go ahead and try and change the name, it still submits the event. Now, this is where the issue comes in. The submit function that's provided within any web browser actually completely neglects any of your form validation. Meaning that if you have required fields and you trigger this event programmatically, well, unfortunately, it will fire the event, but it won't take into account the fact that the fields are just empty. So here is a way to fix it, and it's super simple, but it makes such a big impact when it comes to like the consistency of the data that you're sending. So if I go back to Visual Studio Code, all we need to change is rather than calling form.submit, we need to call form.request_submit. Now that, because I have marked this as required, if I try and trigger this event, it will actually take into account the fact that I specified that required attribute within this name field, and it's going to ask me for this name before actually firing the event. So this is something that you can implement into your websites, into the forms that you create, and you trigger them programmatically to make sure that this actually doesn't happen, and use the right way of triggering that submit. So the request submit function rather than just the submit function on its own. So as you can see, that's quite interesting. It's a very simple tip, but it works very well. What is this? Gcore wants to send you important information. Huh? What is it? Gcore is a global leader in private and public cloud services. Did you know that? Their aim is to provide customers with cloud infrastructure for computing, storing, protecting, and delivering content worldwide with a latency of no more than 30 milliseconds. Do you know how fast that is? With its virtual machines that allow you to deploy and scale projects in just a few clicks, to bare metal servers that give you unlimited access and control, you can definitely rely on the modern cloud technology that Gcore offers. Gcore has partnered with Intel and GraphCore to provide cutting-edge technology and offer incredible products that include CDN, DDoS protection, DNS, storage and streaming services, and advanced security all in one platform. If you're interested in learning more, make sure you click on the link in the description and immerse yourself in the incredible and wonderful world of cloud computing. Whoa. What just happened? I feel like I just zoned out. What happened? Huh? Am I like going crazy or something, or am I missing something? No, I think all is fine. Okay, well, going back to the video, now I want to show you another really cool trick that you can use with your forms, and I'll show you how to also style it so it like appears the way it's supposed to be. Let's assume a scenario that I have this whole form, but I don't want to allow people to click on it. The input, the button, trigger events, whatever, just the form, it's supposed to be disabled until someone completes something. What we can do is we can add an attribute called INERT. So if we go onto my form, and here I just write, in the same way we write required, we'll write INERT. Now have a look what this actually does. Now suddenly I cannot do anything. There is no clickability, I can't click the button and nothing happens. Because the whole form, from the form tag to the closing form tag, everything inside is just suddenly not available, disabled in a way, but you know, it's just a keyword that does the whole thing to the whole form. Now the cool thing you can do here is you can actually reference the form in your CSS and reference the attribute by passing it into the square brackets in the CSS called INERT. And the cool thing that happens here is that we can set the opacity to like 0.5. And if we go back to the browser, you'll see that the whole form looks and appeals like it's disabled. And the cool thing is that you can disable a form but apply any styling that you want to it as well. So it's a really cool trick that I think it's cool for any web developer to know. You can show this to your friends. You can show off how cool you are with the things that you know. And yeah, and that's probably where I'm going to wrap up the video. So I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorials. If you do like my tutorials, please show me some love, smash the thumbs up button, share it with your friends. I'd love to make more tutorials, but I just need to know that you guys are also interested. And as always, guys, thank you very much, and I'll see you next week for the next video. So yeah, bye.